So thank you for having us. I'm Kristen McConnell from the Prevention Council of Putnam, and I also co-chair each of the Communities That Care coalitions throughout the county, one of them being the Putnam Valley CTC, as we call it.
And my name is Marie O'Connor. I coordinate the Putnam County Communities That Care Coalition, as well as work for the Prevention Council of Putnam.
So what we're going to be going through are the results of the 2020 Prevention Needs Assessment, or what we call the P&A survey. So before we go into this, I just want to officially thank the district for participating in a year that was, an unprecedented challenge for all of us. We, for 10 years, administered this survey throughout each district in the spring of the even years. And we knew that would not happen, obviously, in April, May of 2020. And we really spent a lot of time trying to determine what to do as we approached the fall of last year. Did we want to burden you with a survey administration when there were so many unknowns? And Marie is really the liaison with each of the districts, and we were just really pleased and want to thank you for your participation during the time that we were in. So it's really important that we have this longitudinal data, and even though it was administered in the fall and not the spring, it's still really important that we keep this momentum going with all the districts every 2 years. So this administration was in the fall, like I said, of 2020, and included the students in even grade years, which we do every year. And the nice thing about, oh, can you hear me? Is it because of my mask? Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, what's happening there? I can keep going while you're doing that, or no, you don't want me to do that? So the nice thing about what happened last year, one positive, I'll try to be positive about 2020, was that we did this full electronic administration. So that's the two main differences, was the fall of 2020 instead of spring, and then all the districts, not just you, agreed to administer the survey entirely online, which meant that there were no paper pencil surveys. So what that actually resulted in was an extremely high completion rate compared to other years. So that was really nice to see the students participating more. We had actually experienced something unusual 2 years ago. We offered electronic administration in some districts, and it didn't pan out as well. So this was a really nice thing. We were really, really pleased to see the students really, maybe because they were online so much with school at that point, they trusted the internet a little more and felt comfortable that their answers were confidential. Oh, it's not working. That's okay. I can keep speaking about that slide anyway. So as was on the slide was, so last year in the fall, 355 Putnam Valley 8th, 10th, and 12th graders completed the survey, and we did a comparison in 2018, 249 completed it, so clearly a higher return rate. And throughout the county, just under 2,100 students in those respective grades completed the survey. Like I said, they're all online, and it's passive consent, which means that we provide you a letter, and you, the district, sends something out to parents informing them of the survey, what it is, and the parents have to opt out their child if they don't want them to complete the survey. So the purpose of the survey, this is great because I'm going to get to that, is to assess the adolescent substance use, antisocial, and risk and protective factors. So that's what we'll focus on, because we know that those predict behavior and adolescent problems. So can I hit the back arrow, or is that going to mess up? Okay, I just want to make sure I'm, okay, good. So this next slide really just covers the validity and confidentiality of the survey. So students can skip questions. There is a cut point in the survey, but they don't have to actually finish the survey. They're assured it's confidential, and like I said, we were really pleased to see the return rate, particularly being in online administration. And surveys are actually eliminated when responses are determined to be dishonest. We don't evaluate these surveys. They're sent to our evaluator in Salt Lake City, and they run them through, and there's certain honesty questions throughout the survey, and if those questions are inconsistent or answered dishonestly, their surveys are not included in the results. So we feel fairly confident in the results. Sorry. So one thing, do I have anything else before I go forward? Okay. So one thing that we just want to point out is that throughout the survey, there's 3 types of measures that are used. So for the purposes of this discussion tonight, we're focusing on what's called past 30-day use. And that's really a measure of the percentage of students that disclosed using a substance at least once in the past 30 days prior to taking the survey. And it's really a more sensitive indicator of the level of current use of substance. So what I mean by that is if it asks lifetime use questions, they may have tried something once. So that's not really a sensitive indicator of consistent use. So if you look here at the past 30-day use in Putnam Valley, 2020 obviously being the furthest to the right, the lighter blue shade, you can see a significant decline in 10th grade past 30-day use of alcohol, and about leveling out for 12th grade, but we were really pleased. Another thing I just want to mention is there's really not enough data to support whether or not COVID had an impact on young people's use just yet. We heard a lot of information and a lot of reports as it was happening that adults were home more and adults were admittedly drinking more when they were under the lockdown last year, but we had a lot of concerns. We would talk amongst ourselves that because of young people and just households in general being somewhat isolated in terms of everyone's home, but everyone's behind a different door, at different floors, they have headphones, they're on different Zooms, et cetera, that there was potential for there to be an increased use in substance use because not everybody was in the same room together and there was a lot of distractions. So we were really concerned. Then we see the survey results, and you'll see throughout there actually are some significant declines in some areas, and particularly alcohol 30-day use. To see it go down that much for 10th graders is really significant. Similarly for tobacco, if you can see for 12th graders from 2018 to 2020, again a nice decline in movement in the right direction. Even though we've seen a decline with tobacco over the last 20 years with vaping, we did see a little bit of an uptick a couple of years ago, but this was a nice reduction. So now for, I mentioned e-cigarettes or vaping. Do you want to talk about this or want to talk about
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question on the
Yeah.
on the trend, on the issue of is it possible, or is there? Are you looking into the sample being, because its sample is much larger than a handwritten surveys, that because you have more participation, you might have more people just in general that are answering the questions, and maybe is there any statistic validity, or is it just a coincidence that there's an increase in participation and then the decrease in certain metrics?
So that's a really good question, right? So we didn't hear from our evaluators specifically that there was any direct relationship between what you're saying, excuse me, but there could be some of that, and we're not sure in past years, because each student can opt out in the moment. They're told there's instructions they read, and we don't know why they opt out. So are they opting out because they don't want to disclose their use, or are they just opting out because they want to, make their own decision? So we're not sure who opted out and why, we had higher rate participation, and if that's actually directly related to use. But we can definitely ask our evaluators if you'd like.
Because students would have, in theory, with an online, they'd have as much time as they want to go through this survey, as opposed to being in a social studies classroom, whatever it is. They might have limited time to go through this survey.
Well, is that true though? Do they have?
I do think that there was a limit on time as far as completing the entire survey, but you do have a point. It's not to that exact 40-minute period.
Right.
So here, looking at the 30-day use of e-cigarettes, you can see here that the kids were really only surveyed for this for the first time in 2018. So you can see, according to the chart here, and I'll talk a little bit about what vaping is, but you can see, according to the chart here, the 2020 results are far greater than they were back in 2018, which we expect to see. So basically, vaping is the act of inhaling and exhaling an aerosol, often referred to as a vapor, which is produced by an e-cigarette or similar device. The term is used because e-cigarettes do not produce tobacco, but rather an aerosol, and often mistaken for water vapor that actually consists of fine particles. Many of these particles, as we know, contain varying amounts of toxic chemicals, which have been linked to cancer, as well as respiratory and heart disease. So a vape generally it consists of a mouthpiece, a battery, a cartridge, containing the e-liquid or e-juice with a heating component for the device that is powered by a battery. And when the device is used, the battery heats up the heating component, which turns the contents of the e-liquid into an aerosol. So I know this has been a hot topic, and we see that the rates are continuing to rise. There is a national, as you see in the yellow columns there, so we are still far below the national level, which is a good thing. However, there was a reduction again, as you see in the 2020, which we can attribute to the fact that the kids were not as much congregating in school bathrooms or doing it, publicly, because there was not gatherings.
Right.
I just point out there that the Putnam Valley number significantly dropped, but the national numbers significantly increased. I think that speaks a lot to our community and the efforts and the awareness of our parents and their school employees. If to see that large of a jump from the national numbers coincide with a drop in the numbers in Putnam Valley, I think is just an impressive statement for our community and our students. So I didn't want to let that pass without making that note.
Definitely. This was, again, pleasant surprise. Numbers are going in the right direction. And like you said, compared to the national counterparts, Putnam Valley is doing very, very well. So past 30-day use of marijuana, a very hot topic these days. So as you can see from past years, particularly in 12th grade, it's pretty much leveled out since 2012. Around 1 in 3 students admitting that completed the survey admitting to using marijuana in the past 30 days. That's not uncommon across the county. But then what we were pleased with, especially for 12th graders, is to see the decline that you can see that from the past, from 2018. 10th grade remained about the same, but with everything that's happening in our state and nationally with related to marijuana, there are young people get such a mixed message. It's just been an uphill battle for a really long time. And we just weren't seeing a lot of movement, and now to see Putnam Valley 12th graders, which is the highest users, when you're looking at the 3 grades, to see them decline like that, we were really pleased. And again, we don't know if we can attribute some of that to everyone being home and it being more difficult to conceal the smell and using, or what. That's like what remains still a little unknown. That will take some time for us to find out. So binge drinking, I can see it was 0 actually this year, which is really nice for 8th grade. So I'll read the questions so everyone understands from the survey. Think back over the last 2 weeks. How many times have you had 5 or more alcoholic drinks in a row? So that's what's defined as binge drinking. Again, something that's really serious, really significant numbers throughout the region, throughout the state, not just Putnam County or Putnam Valley, to see these numbers. But if you look back to where we started surveying in 2008, being at almost 40% of 12th graders that completed the survey admitting that, down to 2020. I mean, that's, again, really, really pleased, and even 10th graders as well, to see that decline. we were seeing a nice decline in 12th grade. After a little bit of an uptick in 2016, we were seeing, a decline in 2018, but now we're down to 20% that completed it, which again is really, really nice to see.
So
This is-
again, on the sample size, or the sample, if I'm reading this correctly, essentially the 2016 eighth graders are now the 2020
Yes,
12th
so,
graders.
yes.
So if we follow those lines, we're getting the cohorts, not necessarily the same exact
kids,
students,
right.
but the same cohorts, correct?
That's correct, yes. I can tell you like data. So the reason why binge drinking is really concerning just across the board is because we know any alcohol use for young people impacts their brain. Their brain is not fully developed to age 23 to 25, so any substance use, any alcohol use is problematic, and they're more likely to develop an addiction later on in life the younger that they start. But binge drinking also has a lot of other risks like alcohol poisoning and other serious consequences. So this is a more serious type of underage drinking that we bring up because it's really important that we're aware of it.
If I can just add
course.
one quick anecdotal piece of data. When we've talked to kids in focus groups throughout the county, one of the comments that we often hear is that, well, when we drink, we binge drink. That's what we do. We don't go out to casually have a beer with friends and, hang out and, watch a game. When we drink purposely to get drunk.
Yeah, that's a good point. So then, past 3-day use of other drugs. So this is important. I'll just note, I'll explain that the way the questions are worded use prescription stimulants or amphetamines not prescribed to you, because we know that young people are prescribed these drugs. So it's very much clear in the survey. Use, again, and they give examples, Ritalin, Adderall, use prescription sedatives or sleep not prescribed to you. And they give examples, tranquilizers such as Xanax, Valium, things like that. So it's very clear that the drugs that they are, if they're answering yes, it's not a prescription that was prescribed to them. So, and then inhalants. So again, these are very small numbers, but we still like to point them out because, we want them all to be zero. So, but if you look, you can see that was pointed out here, no inhalant use in 2016 and a very small amount in 2020. Okay. So now we're gonna just shift a little bit to perception of risk. So the way I like to explain perception of risk is if you perceive something to be risky or harmful, you're less likely to, ideally, you think you're less likely to use that. So there's characteristics of risk factors for school, community, family environments, as well as students and their peer groups that are known to predict likelihood of use. And other things like school dropout, delinquency, teen pregnancy, violent behavior, things like that. And then there's the other side of the coin, which are protective factors that exert a positive influence or buffer against those negative risk factors, which then would reduce the likelihood of adolescents engaging in problem behaviors. So the premise of this approach is that in order to promote positive youth development and prevent problem behavior, it's necessary to address these factors that predict the problem behavior. So we've teased out the drugs that we just spoke about, alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, prescription drugs. The reason why prescription drugs doesn't date back into 2008 is just because it wasn't measured in the survey until things really became problematic in about 2012, and then it was added to the survey in 2014. So you can see here, so you want perception of risk to be high. Like I said, so for example, you see tobacco was actually declining over time, which was a concern because we know that for 20 years, tobacco, it was a great job that was done to really get kids to, young people to be, to perceive tobacco to be very risky and harmful to their bodies. And then you can see now in 2020, it rose up again, which was really, really nice. Prescription drugs continues to go up, again, probably because people hear and see of what can potentially happen with overdoses, et cetera. So And then marijuana has always sort of been that one that we struggle with because, again, of a lot of outside influences that are not, beyond our control. However, it was nice to see in 2018 and 2020, I mean, you're not seeing a whole significant difference here, the perception of risk to increase a little bit. So then we focus on another risk factor we've been looking at for the last 10 years, perception of parental disapproval. And this is important because if a young person believes their parents disapprove, they might be less likely to engage in that behavior. The e-cigs was added just this year as well, right? So we were really pleased the survey developer added vapes and e-cigarettes. So you can see we don't have any baseline, but we do have it for 2020 all the way to the right. So you want these to be high. The only really area that we're disappointed but not entirely surprised with what's going on, obviously you can see marijuana, the perception of parental disapproval dropped significantly from 2016 and 18.
What is the question asked for that one?
I don't have that question here. I knew someone was going to ask me that, and I said, I didn't put it on here for some reason. We can get that for you. We can get that for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. There are actually probably a bunch of questions, not just one, but we'll get them to you. We can actually get you the entire survey to look at.
Thank you.
Do you want to talk about this one?
So another area that we look at is perception of peer disapproval and their overall results of that. Young people who associate with peers who engage in substance use are much more likely to engage themselves in the same behavior. So peer drug use has consistently been found to be among the strongest predictors of substance use among youth. Even when young people come from well-managed families and do not experience other risk factors, spending time with friends who use drugs greatly increases the risk of that problem developing. So here, looking at this survey, if you look at the comparisons, there really wasn't much change over the past 4 years in the prescription drug area. So that all remained pretty high. Really, this particular study here, is pretty consistent. And, we see that marijuana actually rose a bit from 2018, which was a good result to see. And alcohol, tobacco stayed pretty much the same.
So then, again, for risk factors overall, so here we also know that there's research that supports that legal restrictions on alcohol or tobacco have been followed by a decrease in consumption. So an example of that would be like the availability or access of alcohol can be related to the use or abuse by young people. So, and then let me explain antisocial behaviors, which is parental attitudes. So the third risk factor on the right, the full name is parental attitudes favorable toward antisocial behavior, is really a measure of the percentage of students who report any involvement in the past year with 2 antisocial behaviors listed, and we can get you the survey. So when we're looking at reporting risk, so laws and norms, the first one I'll explain, laws and norms that are favorable toward drug use. So that's what that is, availability of drugs and parental attitudes favorable toward antisocial behavior, which would include drug use. So you could see for laws and norms favorable, it's actually nice to see it going down. When we started the survey, 10 years ago or 12 years ago, and it was higher, and we were talking to kids and just kind of try to understand like what their perception, because the perception for young people is a reality, even if we don't believe it to be true. The analogy that I would give to colleagues was it's a Class A misdemeanor to steal a shopping cart from a supermarket, and it's a violation to get caught with marijuana. It's like a $50 fine. So that was so that's an example of a law or a norm in a culture, a norm in a community where they might look at it and say it's really not a big deal if I get caught with weed, but it's a Class A misdemeanor, you're arrestable charge to steal a shopping cart. So that's what I mean when we look at like laws and norms. That's the example that I give. So do you want to talk about protective? Sure. Okay.
So this is always a better vibe, the protective
Yes,
factors.
positive.
Positive. Okay, so parents, siblings, and other family members, when they praise their kids, encourage them to attend to things done well by their child, children are, of course, less likely to engage in substance use and other problem behaviors. So rewards for positive participation in activities helps youth bond to the community, thus lowering the risk for substance use. When young people are recognized for their contributions at school, they're less likely to be motivated to be involved in substance use and other problem behaviors. So if you take a look at this graph here, there's 3 different categories: the family rewards, community rewards, and school rewards. And you can see that they really haven't changed much, with a little bit of a raise in 2020 for positive factors in all 3 areas, which was nice to see.
Yeah, school especially.
Yep, school especially, if you see that. And remember that seeing the raising of that, the increase is good here in this category.
Yes. Let's put that on there. Okay. And then gambling. So we include gambling because over time our agencies received some small gambling prevention funds, and we've worked with school districts and throughout the community, and we felt there is research to support gambling as an antisocial risky behavior that can be connected to using substances. So, and all things considered here, especially in 2020 with the use of online gambling, significant decline here across the board. I mean, to see 12th graders drop that much in a time where they're online as much as they are, and it isn't as difficult as we probably think it is to access online gambling, to see these declines, I mean, continue to pretty much go in the right direction. This was really nice to see. Oh, there we go. Do you want to do this? Okay. It wasn't working. Oh, I think you skipped. Did I skip it? The button got stuck. Oh, there we go.
Yep.
Oopsie. Oh, this one. Oh, there's not much to say about this one. Sorry. So we like to just explain age of onset. I talked a little earlier about the earlier that someone starts to use a substance, the more risk they're at to develop a problem later on in life. So the age that someone begins is called age of onset, and we want that to be later. So I just put the details are in the full report of the survey, but throughout Putnam Valley in the 8th, 10th, and 12th grade, age of onset has gotten later from 20 to when we began inception in 2008 to 2020, which is a really good thing. Sorry about that.
So alcohol and driving. We always really like to take a look at this because we all know how very dangerous this can be. So in 2020, the results were 0.9% of students in grades 8, 10, and 12 reported they have driven after drinking alcohol, slightly increased from 2018, where we saw 0.4%. As far as an explanation to that, it could very well be that, it's a slight increase, right? So, it could be that there were more people participating this time around, as to the gentleman's comment earlier, that we see that kind of increase. In 2020, the result was 6.8% of students in grades 8, 10, and 12 had reported they had been in a car with someone who had been drinking. And this is a decrease from 2018 result, which was 18.2. So that's really quite, a decrease. And again, in 2020, we saw our kids being far less likely to be in a car with their peers. So again, we can contribute possibly some of that to COVID. But here below, you can see 2020 versus the 2018, looking at 8th grade, 10th grade, and 12th grade. And what we see here is 8th grade, 6.0% had stated that they had driven in a car, as opposed to 17.2, so the nice decrease there. In 10th grade, 9.7 as compared to 20.9%, so a pretty significant decrease there. And then in 2020, looking at the 12th grade, 4.9 compared to 15%. So decreases across the board, which is nice to see.
And Putnam Valley participates in the Simulated Impaired Driving Experience program over the summer. We really Marie's very involved with that, and it really addresses both distracted, drunk, and impaired driving, and all of that in several different components. And so we actually share these results with the students in that training, and talk to them about that. So.
But I think we have to not be complacent because people weren't in course
Exactly.
in general.
Right.
So I'm hoping there was a decrease because of education, but I'm sure the significant numbers is partially because the
We
quarantine.
feel the same, right? Yeah, there are definitely some assumptions that we've drawn, and like I said, it's some of this is too early to really know. But I'm glad that I was proven wrong when I was worried that kids were using at home more. So I'm glad that.
When Kristen and I first saw the results, we did like a
Yeah,
ah.
yeah. So
that
because
was
we
good
didn't know
news.
what to think last year, so about everything was just there was just so much going on for everybody, and it was such a difficult time for everyone. Families, young people, their mental health, their physical health, everything. So. All that said, we were really pleased as we looked over the survey, and we really commend Putnam Valley. You're constantly, and you work really well with us. Like I said, you worked with us and did the survey in a pandemic. We know that you have so many competing priorities, and it just shows that this is one of them. So thank you so much for continuing to work with us, and we will send the full report to you as well as a copy of the survey. You can actually see what it looks like. It will look a little different than online, but the same questions. So, thanks.
Marie, before you go.
Yeah.
The Putnam Valley chapter of the Communities That Care, are we going to meet in person this year, or are we meeting online? Like what? Because I'd like to do like a public service, like if anybody wants to join the Communities That Care Coalition, like how to do that.
Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah.
So the Putnam Valley Communities That Care Coalition meets bi-monthly, so every other month. We'll have our first meeting in October. We would love for any community members to get involved. Parents are always welcome to get involved. We love to when students come on board and get involved. But it'd be terrific if we can have some further response. Meetings will still be on Zoom. But again, that seems to work for people. It seems to be more convenient for people. We generally meet at a 3 o'clock time. And
You can include that in the email if you want.
yeah, we can include more details in an
So
email to you guys.
Yeah, just a thing so we could send out a blast so people would know who to contact and how to join if they want to join that committee.
Thank
Great,
you.
thanks.
Coming from Barbara, who's been a member for many years, so thank you.
A quick question. Are you going to continue to field the survey in the fall, or are you going to switch back to the spring?
We're going to continue with fall administration. Actually, it can be more beneficial to do it in the fall because it's earlier in the year and the students identify more in the grade they're in. We started in the spring many years ago, and then we learned that like for a 10th grader, it's like they're in their minds that they're practically an 11th grader. So,
And the same thing for seniors,
Yeah.
when you're assessing
right, they're leaving.
in the
so.
spring, they're leaving.
Right.
So it's really, the data is not as critical as it would be if we did it
Right.
early in the year.
But it wouldn't be this year, this is an
No.
odd year, so it would be
Right,
next year.
exactly.
I know in the full report, it goes, it kind of shows the regions area, the 6 school districts in the county and the state, correct? Do you have any findings? Because that would be a tool that we would use to see if, for whatever reason, there might be a difference in opinions or actions based on the programming that we have here in the school district as opposed to other school districts.
Were there
Are there any findings at this point on how
Not yet.
we fare?
Not that we've seen.
Not that we've seen.
No. There's not a lot of variation typically throughout the various school districts. But this year, we had so much more participation that you never know. But we're always looking, and it seems that even when we make these changes or these reductions are in the right direction, we still feel like more work needs to be done, just like you said, because we don't want to get complacent and think like just because we see a reduction in drinking and driving or being in the car with someone who's intoxicated doesn't mean that if we stop talking about it or shift to something else, then that there's potential for that to increase. So we're really going to always focus on, no matter what, alcohol, marijuana, tobacco. They're the big three that are indicators of use and moving on to other substances later in life. But we are definitely going to consider, if we see something unusual, looking at how we can address that. So.
And, you know, it may seem coincidental or odd that a conversation about budget and finance and money is right before this, and it's not at all. Because it is coincidental, but there is a connection in terms of connections. Mental health is my field. How many times have we heard everybody needs to be positively connected with at least one thing, one person, one cause, one interest, and that's how we get these better results.
Right.
So they're really very connected, and a lot of what we do in this district is to continue to make sure these numbers go down when they're supposed to go down and go up when they're supposed to go up. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry to ask so many questions. The thrust of the survey is behaviors related to risky behavior, in this case substances. Is there a different survey that is other behaviors? I'm thinking of violence, sexual abuse, that type of thing.
Some of that's included in here when we send the full report, and it has some of those risk factors like depression and things like that are in there, right?
Thank you.
Dominic, just from a student's perspective, is there something that just you have a sense that we could do better, or in terms of encouraging or rewarding positive behaviors? I hate to put you on the spot, but you know you.
That's okay. Thank
but
you.
I'm going to do it anyway. No.
I think especially for the seniors, it's being treated with respect like an adult. No one likes being talked down to. So ensuring that you give them point blank the risks and what they can do to counteract any risk factors is most likely the best solution to ensure that the seriousness is understood.
And that would filter down even to, you know, lowly juniors, not just the seniors, right?
Well, I can't speak for the other grades as much.
So you're saying instead of saying, don't do this, here's the dangers, here's the risk, make an informed decision, we're treating you with respect, and that works.
I believe, although that is really anecdotal, that would possibly be more effective, you know, to include, you know, such phrasing or such motion of respect.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you both for your time. I know it's a very long evening for you.
No
but
problem.
thank
Happy
you
to
both.
be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.